Hi there, welcome back to the Open. We are coming to you live from the Stone Hearts and Mind Investor Leaders Conference here in Sydney at the beautiful Opera House. Now, worth noting, one of the people who really helped bring this conference to life, Gary Weiss, of course, from Ariadne fame, and now, of course, the chairman of Ardent Leisure. He is one of the guest speakers at this year's conference, and I was lucky enough to catch up with him a little bit earlier this morning.
It started, as I indicated this morning in my address, as purely a concept on a piece of paper, has now morphed into become what I believe to be the most important and significant investment conference in Australia.
Can you give us a bit of background? Because obviously you're on the board of the Victor Chang Cardiac Research, and you'd been travelling to the Son one in New York, in the US, and thought, you know, we could do that here.
Yeah, so a few years ago, sitting in the audience, I thought that particularly with the personnel around the board table of Victor Chang and the various commercial and investment connections that we had, that if anyone would be able to pull off this event, we would be.
And are you surprised, or have you been surprised by how well it's gone and how it's been embraced by the investment community here in Australia?
Very surprised, and indeed very pleasantly surprised. It has been truly uplifting to see the embrace of the concept of the conference by so many prominent and leading investment managers around Australia, and that has been a very gratifying experience.
And of course, you know, the importance then of the money raised that goes to various organisations like Victor Chang. There's a host of them. How important to get the money to the research where it's needed?
It is critical. Not only Victor Chang, but indeed all other medical research institutes are facing the same challenges in terms of raising or procuring funding to enable their research initiatives to proceed against a backdrop of restrained and indeed declining government funding.
Can I ask now more specifically about it, which no doubt you're not particularly surprised about, Ardent Leisure, of course, a somewhat tumultuous time in recent years. Your thoughts? What is the value you see there? What is the opportunity that you've seen in Ardent Leisure?
I think the fundamental premise that we saw in Ardent was that there were excellent assets held within the company, but to be blunt, a company that had lost its way.
How do you right the ship, and how difficult is it a thing to do to be able to turn a ship around like that?
This will not be an easy turnaround exercise, but we do have great confidence in the quality of the assets. And now that I have not only joined the board but become chairman, I've now had the opportunity of meeting a lot of key management people within Ardent, particularly at the various divisions of Ardent, and I'm very confident that the quality of the people in the organisation is such that we have the basis to ensure that there will be a successful recovery. I found that the management and the team generally at Ardent are very committed, very passionate about their businesses, and I think that augurs very well for the future.
And the search for a longer-term CEO continues?
Yes, we've had a few changes at management level, both in the US and in Australia, and there are search programs particularly underway in terms of the US business, and we will commence a search in Australia for a replacement CEO.
More broadly, can I get your thoughts around the investment landscape at the moment, and in particular the recent, I suppose it's been happening for a while, but in Australia in particular, the big momentum and emergence of passive style funds and passive investing. Does that impact your investment style at all, and what have you made of it?
Look, my historical investment approach is to be stock specific rather than market general. So I haven't got a particular comment on the phenomenon of passive investing, although of course I've read plenty of articles which would rather suggest that the explosion in passive funds potentially portends the beginnings of the next crisis as passive investors head for the exits on any significant downturn.
Do you place much stock in that?
hard to know. As I said, I'm not a particular expert on that area, but certainly there is a sufficient level of informed comment that would indicate that some level of caution is required.
One of the other interesting trends, but maybe not a trend, but more focus that we've seen on here in Australia is the amount of activist shareholders that has taken place, or certainly being reported on now. You've been doing it for a fair while now, so it's not exactly...
Probably too long, yes.
What have you made of it? I mean, do you see it as competition, or do you see it as actually a help in terms of, what you're trying to achieve?
Look, as you say, I've been doing it for quite a number of years, so this current wave of activism is not particularly new. I suppose, though, that to differentiate what it was, say, probably 20 or 30 years ago, certainly far greater support for intelligent activist moves by the institutional community than would have been the case, as I said, 20 or 30 years ago. And
just finally, one of the other sort of debates at the moment is whether or not there's too much of a focus in corporate Australia on paying dividends, whether or not, you look at the US or somewhere where there's a lot of reinvestment into future earnings growth. Your take on the question as to whether or not there's too much focus here on paying out dividends?
Again, for me, it's company specific. There's no general proposition. When we take stakes in companies, when we make investments, when we procure control of companies, our view is always to invest for the long term. And that's how we proceed in terms of capital allocation and ultimately dividend distribution, return of proceeds to shareholders.